Kristiansand is a seaside resort on the Norwegian Riviera. Kristiansund is a harbour town deep in the western fjords. Just one letter and over 1,000 kilometres of scenery separate them as I travel around the coast from Sund2Sand over land. My stay in Bergen had been a fleeting overnight stop, and it was a morning Norway coach back out again heading south down the coast with a genteel just 3 hours and one ferry to Haugesund. Haugesund is located within the Kristiansund, a 30-kilometre long strait that separates the island of Karmøy from the mainland of Norway. The presence of the island helps to shelter Haugesund from some of the worst of the weather and turns the area into a strategically important location, as shipping could pass along the coast without having to sail through the heavy seas of the North Sea. The town itself is arranged around the mainland and two islands of Risøy and Hasseløy, creating an internal harbour of the waterfront area of the Smedasundet. The town's initial growth was on the back of a herring industry, with huge numbers of the fish being present in the straits. Despite it only being a small unnamed fishing village, Haugesund has an important neighbour, as King Harald Fairhair, the First King of Norway, lived at Askjesund, just south of modern-day Haugesund. The growth of Haugesund was slow, and it only achieved town status in 1855, separating from the surrounding municipality of Torvastad to become its own municipality. Over the following years, the city has absorbed many of the surrounding villages and towns to create the 72.69 square kilometre urban area that exists to today. Harald Fairhair reigned from 872 to 930, though there is academic debate as to whether he ever actually existed, as the only evidence is from Icelandic sagas from the 12th century onwards. But let's assume that he did. Harald was at the time the Viking leader of his own kingdom, and when they weren't raiding other countries, Viking kingdoms liked to fight each other. At some point around 872 on the Hafrsfjord, close to modern-day Stavanger, a major battle took place between multiple Viking kingdoms, the result of which was a victory for Harald, and with that the unification of the various Viking kingdoms into a single kingdom of Norway, with Harald as the first leader of the united nation. A side to this is that the leaders who had lost and didn't want to submit to Harald's rule emigrated to Iceland, kicking off the large-scale, by these times, settlement of that country. Today, a statue to Harald Fairhair, with his flowing locks looking like he's just stepped out of a shampoo commercial, stands on rocks high above the Smedasundet. Harald lived to the age of 83, dying 3 years after relinquishing the throne to his favourite son, Eric Bloodaxe, and was buried in a mound at Hauge by the Strait of Karmsund, just north of the modern settlement of Haugesund. The modern town of Haugesund has grown up in a grid pattern, stretching back up the hill from the water's edge, and close to the very centre of town is a reminder of its history, with the Fiskerne, or fisherman statue, the most significant statue in the town. Combined with a water feature, the statue occupies the street of a whole block, with the statue at the highest point of the street and the water feature cascading down the slope of the road. Behind the fisherman statue is the town's church, Vår Frelsers kirke, or Our Saviour's Church. Historically, the people of Haugesund attended church at the nearby Skåra Church, but with the establishment of Haugesund as its own municipality in 1855, a decision was taken to build a church for the town, with a suitable plot of land was quickly purchased in the centre of the town. However, it took another 35 years before permission was given by the government for a church to be built on the land in 1890. And it took another near 10 years before an architectural competition was held to design the church, with Einar Helleland being declared the winner in February 1899. From this point, the process sped up quite a bit, with construction of the church taking place between 1899 and 1901, and the consecration taking place on the 6th of March 1902, giving the townspeople a church of their own to attend, with a capacity of around 850 people. Today, the church is a parish church in the Diocese of Stavanger of the Church of Norway, the evangelical Lutheran denomination of Protestantism that is, by a long way, the largest religious group in the country. The church was built to a cruciform design in red bricks to a neo-Gothic style. An 11-metre high chandelier, which is designed to symbolise a huge royal crown, topped with 12 lamps, one for each of the apostles, was added in 1916. The spire of the church at 53 metres high is one of the most distinguishable items of a relatively low-rise Haugesund skyline. A short walk from the church is the town's very distinctive pink-painted City Hall, or Haugesund's Rådhus. The City Hall was built following the donation of 1 million Norwegian kroner to the council by shipping magnate Knut Knutsen and his wife Elizabeth in 1921 to celebrate Knut's 50th birthday. Today, the donation would be around 26 million kroner, or just under £2 million. By the 1920s, Knutsen was the largest steamship owner in Haugesund and one of the largest in Norway. A later donation provided funding for the park around the town hall, and in 1947, a year after her husband's death, Elizabeth gifted a further £1,000,000 for works on decoration of a hall and gardens. After the initial donation, construction work started in 1923 and was completed by the autumn of 1931, though with a pause in works between 1925 and 1929 due to the growing international economic crisis of the 1920s that would ultimately lead to the Great Depression. The town hall has had its bright pink exterior colour since its construction, and in 2010 was named Norway's most beautiful town hall. Heading back towards the waterfront from the town hall, and you quickly come across one of the other stunning bits of architecture in the town, the Risøy Bridge, or Risøybrua, which crosses the Smedasundet and connects the mainland to the smaller of the two islands of the town centre, Risøy. A sign on the bridge states that it was constructed in just 354 days with just 60 workers, with it open to traffic on the 14th of May 1939. Since then, the bridge has undergone renovation works in 1991 and again in 2008. The bridge is 361 metres long and at its peak is 25.2 metres above the sea level, allowing passage for any ships suitable for sailing up the Smedasundet. And because that's not that tall, Risøy is home to both the cruise terminal and the car ferries that serve the outlying islands of the city and region, with only local small catamaran services coming into the harbour on the mainland. Risøy is 0.23 square kilometres, with most of the western side of the island dominated by the docks, workshops and industrial halls belonging to Able, a Norwegian company specialising in the oil, gas and offshore wind industries. When industrial development began in earnest on the island in the 1930s, the population ballooned to around 3,000 residents, with most of the accommodation on the island being built on the eastern side, facing the centre of town. Since then, the population has fallen back down, and in 2014, the population of the island was just 527. At the northern end of the island, you get a good view across the Smedasundet to the mainland, and directly opposite you, the southern coast of Hasseløy. If Risøy is connected to the mainland by the Risøybrua, then it's only natural that Hasseløy is connected to the mainland by the Hasseløybrua. This particular version of the bridge opening in 1954, replacing an older bridge that had been built in 1872. At just 150 metres in length, it's less than half the length of Risøybrua and also quite a bit lower, reflecting the main route through the strait between the Hasseløy and Risøy, then a right turn past the mainland and Risøy, with only pleasure craft entering a small marina that sits between the mainland and Hasseløy. The current bridge does pose a slight problem for the island though, as weight restrictions on it means fire engines cannot carry their full complement of water if they need to get over to the island, only being allowed to cross with 6,000 of their 10,000 litre capacity tanks. Given that the island has many older wooden buildings, this is a potential problem. The island is slightly larger than Risøy at 0.3 square kilometres and has a population of around 1,500, substantially more than its neighbour. The north of the island is predominantly industrial, with a shipyard and workshops occupying the north coast, whilst the southwestern corner of the island is home to offices for the Norwegian Coast Guard that overlook the cruise port and the strait. From the west coast of the island, there are views across to Vibrandsøy, a small group of islands, Trollholmen, Vibrandsøy, Værøy and Gardsøy, that are connected to each other by small bridges or causeways, but have no connection at all by land to either the mainland or Hasseløy. The islands were purchased by the municipality in 2009 and since then have been renovated and turned into a recreational area. A handful of passenger ferries from the ferry quay on the mainland make the short 5-minute crossing to the island each day. The eastern side of Hasseløy is dominated by the small boat harbour, as well as the herring museum, which was closed at the time of visiting. Heading further up the mainland, just beyond the northern tip of Hasseløy, you reach the start of the Kyststien, or coastal path, which runs for about 3 kilometres north away from the city centre. The path follows the coastline through its entire length and is a generally pretty easy path to walk, with a suitable diversion around the only truly hilly part of the walk for those who don't want to, or can't, climb up over rocks. The coastal path includes a large section that takes you across grazing land, as well as past one of the main camping and caravanning grounds of the town. Along the way, there are signboards that point out features in the landscape, wildlife to look out for, and also include maps showing where you are, though it's a very easy path to navigate. Towards the end of the path, you can take a detour out along a spit of land for Kvalen Fyr, or Kvalen Lighthouse. The lighthouse marks the entrance to the harbour of Haugesund and dates back to 1864. From here you can also look down into the small bathing area of Kvalsvik and the sculpture installation Rising Tide, originally located in the Thames in London, that's been here since 2021. The sculpture is made up of 4 horses, but their heads have been replaced with elements of oil wells or nodding donkeys. With each tide the sculptures are covered and then uncovered. A short walk back down the path and you can divert away again, this time to the Haraldshaugen, Norway's national monument. Unveiled in 1872 in connection to the 1000th anniversary of the Battle of Hafrsfjord and Harald Fairhair's unification of Norway under his rule, the monument is placed where Harald's burial mound is once said to have stood. The mound is topped by a 17-metre high obelisk, and around the edge of the mound are 29 standing stones, one for each of the 29 ancient counties of Norway. The original plan was that each county would donate a stone of its own distinctive rock type, but even in a country as geologically varied as Norway, that wasn't possible to fully execute. With my time in Haugesund drawing to a close, it was time to hop back on the Norway Bus Express and head south to Stavanger. From the side of the Askjesund, it was just one short ride through the undersea by Fjordtunnelen before we reached Stavanger, and the penultimate stop on my journey from Kristiansund to Kristiansand. Next time, I conclude my journey by visiting the site of the Battle of Havsfjord. I take a train along the stunning Drangsdalen, and I visit a lighthouse at the end of Kristiansand.